Hello and welcome to another Unreal Engine 4 tutorial. In this video we're going to discuss variables and how we're going to use them in our game to control all sorts of things. This is an extremely broad topic, being that variables is essentially a way to describe a lot of things, but we will start delving in. If you watched the first video in the series, then you will have the advantage of a head start as I discussed it there, but even if you skipped over that one, we'll go through this again. To begin with, we're going to select our base character. And because we have no script in here, we're going to select Open Full Blueprint Editor, and now we're here, back on our event graph. Over on the left-hand side, you can see a variables category, and here is where we would add our variables. If you recently watched the last video, you may remember that I took away some of the stuff we did in base character. This stuff's going to be permanent, and this is where I'm going to show you why we created that child class. So let's start by clicking on this variable button right here. That will give us a new variable. By default, it will be a Boolean. A Boolean is a true or false value. Let's give it a name. Let's start with is dead. Again, no spaces. If you'd like, you can put a question mark at the end there to remind you that it is indeed a question to be asked. We'll hit enter. Then we need to compile and save, and we can decide what the value is by default. We do that with the details panel over on the right. Here we have our is dead, and if we tick this box, it's true, and if we leave it unticked, it's false. Let's grab our event begin play. Just gonna find that little center area, which is up here. I like to start my graphs about here. Just a little bit of OCD. And what we're going to do is type in a print string. Like I mentioned in the last video, you can use a print string to troubleshoot anything. Now, let's drag and drop our print string on top of the string value. It's going to say it's not compatible. However, if we drag and drop here, we get the option to have a set or a get. So variables have two types of nodes inside of the graph. Another way of looking at gets and sets are reads and writes. So if we get a value, we're reading it. We want to know what that value is, and that looks like this. So that will just give me what the value is. Likewise, if we look at a setter, this is where we can tell the value to change. So by default, it's false. If I was to plug in this node here, and then click on this button, as soon as we begin playing with this character, that is dead value will change to true. So that's how we would configure a setter. Right now, we're going to use the getter. We're going to drag and drop the getter on top of the string value. Now we can see that it gives us the option to convert that value, and that's what we want to do. So sometimes you can drag and drop on a node and you'll get these handy little helpers, which is why this is so much easier than, say, coding, because you get all these little details. Everything you can do has been scripted and created previously by someone who understands the code. So they had to code that print string out of C++ script for us to use. The same way that they would have coded variables, in the same way that they've coded this little guy here. So now I'm going to plug event begin play into print string. The savvy among you will realize that this isn't the character that we have inside of our level, but that's okay. So we're going to multitask just a little bit here, and I'm going to show you why it's okay to put script in this character, because it's still going to come up in our level. When I go over to the level and I hit play, you can see in the top left corner, false came up. That was the value of our Boolean converted to a string. And the reason that we could see that value represented, even though we haven't directly referenced the base character, is because the hero character is a child of the base character. So if I was to exit the level here and I double click on the hero character, because the base character is the parent, any variable I put in that parent, I can access here. You can see here that there doesn't appear to be any variables in this character. But if I right click and I type in is dead, now I have that variable right there and I can use it. This comes in extremely handy when you have two characters that are extremely similar. For example, if I had an NPC or an enemy, or if I had another player, say in a multiplayer or a co-op game, they would all contain this value, so long as you can kill your NPCs. I'll leave that one up to you. But they would all have an isDead value. Rather than copying and pasting an isDead value into every single one of those characters, I can create a parent class and the children will naturally adopt the parent's variables. We'll get rid of this for now because we're not going to use it right now. We're going to compile and save because, again, we deleted something. And I'm going to right click on base character and create another child blueprint class. We're going to call this one B_enemy. Enemy is going to stick around. He's going to be possessed by AI in the future. You can see this little star here means that we haven't saved him. Another way to save a character without compiling is to hit the save all button here, and that'll ask us what we want to save. Same thing here. If I select the enemy character and I click on his event graph, right click, type in isDead, there it is. This is why we created a child class from the base character, because we're going to need a stack of variables that all of these characters will have in common. We're going to hit delete, compile, save, and we'll come back to him in a few videos in the future. Let's go and add some more variables to our base character. Here's one we can all understand. We're going to call this one health. But health is most definitely not a Boolean. You do not have health or not have health. You can have a little bit of health, thus we're going to need a number. Let's hop over to the right-hand side and click on the variable type. This is also where you can edit the name of a variable. Click on Boolean, and now we get a drop-down menu. And here are a few of the other variables we can use. Let's select float. Now this is a float value that we can control once we hit compile and save. There is our float value. You can see that decimal point here, as I mentioned in the first video. So health could be carrying a decimal place, something less than 1 or between 1 and 2. Because I mentioned we're going to turn this into some sort of RPG, at some point we're going to have experience levels, which means we're going to work with percentages, which means that some characters will take a certain percent of your health as opposed to a certain value. So that percentage might give us a decimal point. If I divide 7 by 2, then that gives me 3.5. I couldn't do that with an integer because an integer has to be a whole number. So now that we have health, let's change that value to 100. Compile and save after you've changed every interval. Now, default values will replicate across children. However, they will not work the other way. So let's say that our default health value should always be 100. But at some point, our character levels up, and you can see that little star here because I've changed a variable in the base character, and these two characters now have a new default variable. If I was to click on the hero character and my character leveled up at some point, I could set health to whatever I want. And that would be an independent value of the base character, and it would be solely representative of the child class. Because if we had an enemy take damage, then obviously the hero isn't taking damage. So variables that come down the tree will only affect each other.